Hey everybody, it's Dr. Robinson. I'm going to provide you guys with just a brief little lecture discussion about Chapter 1. The PowerPoints for that chapter are uploaded. These PowerPoints come from your book, and so I'm going to assume that you've read, and I'm just going to kind of fill in some of the information that I think would be really helpful to add in addition to the book and the PowerPoints, or just based off my experience, or maybe add some things that are not in your text. And I think that, maybe it's something that you should know. Excuse my messy. This I haven't quite unpacked. So jumping into chapter 1, and I'm not going to go through the PowerPoints. If I keep looking over here, it's because I have notes on the other screen. But basically, chapter 1 introduces you to substances and sort of the concept of use. And individuals using wine or beer or anything of that nature, or even similar to that, fermented grapes and fruits, has been around for a very long time. There are Egyptian and Roman records that indicate that people were consuming substances that altered their perception. We have drawings on caves that indicate as such, and we also know that, interestingly enough, substance abuse treatment has been around for a long time as well, or addiction treatment's been around for a long time as well. Usually that was around isolating people and removing them from society, so putting them in homes or locking them up in insane asylums. Interestingly enough, the Native Americans were the first individuals to use their experience as a way of forming treatment, or providing support for others in their community and their tribe. They were the first ones that sort of, embraced each other in that supportive way. And of course, that's what we know of traditional treatment today, is based off of a support group. I have this experience. Let me share it with you. You share your experience with me. We do this together, and then we sort of go out in the community and share our experience with others. This very supportive, communal, we're going to come together and help you approach to treatment. And we credit early Native Americans with that approach. People have been using, like I said, for a very long time, and they use for a variety of reasons. Your book mentions mourning, recreation, pain relief, stress relief. I'm sure we've all heard someone say, or maybe we even uttered, "Oh gosh, I can't wait to get home and have a drink or have a glass of wine." You've never said that. Maybe you've heard somebody, and sort of it's that idea that substances are a stress reliever, or they provide a release from being inhibited or anxious, or just allow us to feel or behave a little differently. So it's no wonder why folks turn to substances, and we'll get into behaviors in a little bit, but it's no wonder why folks turn to substances when maybe they don't necessarily feel quite right, and maybe they don't have the words to describe why they don't feel quite right, but you can certainly see that it's sort of a convenient way of feeling different. So with that being said, sort of moving on, your book goes into a lot of the economic effects, or the economic toll of addiction, tobacco, and it goes into, let's see, you talk about tobacco, your book talks about alcohol use, and then marijuana use. Marijuana use is an interesting topic, because obviously in some states they have welcomed that practice, and in other states it's seen as pretty taboo. But a large portion of your the first chapter talks about the economic impact, and it talks about, how many folks are using pretty regularly. These numbers are coming from SAMHSA. SAMHSA is the federal authority or the federal agency that sort of guides and dictates substance use and mental health treatment and research. There's a lot of funding out of SAMHSA. You'll hear me talk about SAMHSA a lot. And of course, it's mentioned in your book. And then, it goes on to talk about prescription drugs, which we are not going to get away from in this semester. We're going to talk about opioid use and the effects of that and the costs of that. And I don't necessarily mean just, the amount that it is costing society and communities to treat opioid use. I mean the amount of individuals who are dying. And the majority of my private practice, I can be quite frank and honest, was my private practice was predominantly based off of individuals who were opiate users. Most of those transitioned into heroin, or maybe they would do both. But it's definitely a problem. Let's see. So again, your book goes into a lot of societal costs. And then it does talk about some diseases. This is relevant and really important because this may be a question that you have on your intake or a question that you discuss with your client when you're sitting across from someone who struggled with an addictive use disorder for many years. It would not be uncommon for them to have contracted one of these substance-related diseases, HIV or hepatitis. Sharing needles is common. Unprotected sex is common. And so this is one of the many consequences that can come out of using substances. And so as a counselor, it may be really, really relevant for you to know this information. They may want to discuss the effects of these diseases if they have them. It may be something that you also discuss with them in terms of providing psychoeducation, especially with early users, some of the younger folks that you may come across. Those of you that are working in schools, this is definitely going to be the topic of a lot of psychoed groups or discussion for you with young children. One of the things that I do want to talk about is the terminology in addiction, addictive use disorders, and in addiction counseling. I think it's really, really important to really sort of spend a little bit of time here right now. We don't use the term addict anymore. That is labeling, and it is derogatory, and it is negative, and it certainly pushes folks who have an addictive use disorder in a box that is negative. You are an addict. And inevitably, every time I have this conversation on day one of every single addiction class I teach, I get the question, well, why does AA or 12-step, why is that a part of their culture? Why is that a part of their philosophy? When you go to an AA meeting, or if you've ever seen it, any AA meeting depicted on television or in a movie, they say, my name is such and such, and I'm an addict. And that's something that treatment approach embraces, and they believe that this is a part of who you are. It doesn't define you, but just sort of identifying it, and the hope is to take away sort of the power of the substance, and empower you to, the individual struggling with an addictive use disorder, not to be powerless more over the substance, but just to really sort of look into yourself. So, some folks disagree with that. Some folks say, wow, it's very labeling, and this is just yet again another way that our traditional treatment approach is archaic and maybe not evolving. I'm curious to see what you guys think. Do you think it's beneficial for traditional treatment to still continuously rely on that being the basis of an introduction for a support group? Some other important terminology that I think we need to be mindful of is with the new DSM. So DSM-5 put most mental health disorders on a continuum. So there's a mild, a moderate, and a severe. And so people progress through addictive specifically if we're talking about addictive use disorders, their addiction can progress from mild to, of course, severe. And when you're diagnosing someone, or you may be on a team that needs to diagnose an individual, it's important for you to know where they lie on that continuum. I'm not going to get too much into the criteria right now because we're going to have a whole section on diagnosing. We're going to have a great deal of time spent to how to diagnose and what does that look like. But for you, you need to know that we do not use the term substance abuser. Again, that's labeling, and it pushes folks who may struggle with an addictive use disorder into a very sort of specific box. It's negative when you hear someone say addict or abuser. It does sort of conjure up negative feelings. Or, I was watching a documentary recently about substance use, and someone said every time someone knows that I'm an addict, they sort of grab their purse a little closer. Well, this individual was sharing how she feels labeled and certainly misjudged. And as counselors, that's important for us because our whole goal and our ethics is based off of being bias-free as much as possible. Of course, it's not totally possible, but coming into a room and sitting across from somebody with an open mind, free of judgment, and really sort of meeting them where they are, not with this preconceived notion that there's something wrong with them. An abuser, an addict, and those are pathologizing sort of terms. So we don't really use that. We use substance use. So folks do use substances. I prefer addictive use disorder. This is me personally because I focus not only on chemical addiction, but also process or behavioral addictions. And you'll find when we talk about those, for me, the substance is merely the vessel that the individual is using to deal with life or to deal with stressors or trauma or all of the above, or to just function. And so whether it's a behavioral addiction or a substance addiction or chemical addiction, underlying, it's the same. So underneath the substance, underneath the behavior, the pain and the anguish is the same. There's still a need for escape. There's still a need for stress relief. There's still a need to numb or to feel better or feel different. And that the substance that the individual chooses, your book refers to it as a drug of choice, or the behavior that they engage in is merely just sort of the medium or the vessel that they're using to feel better or feel different. We're going to get into that a lot. You're going to hear me talk about the relationship someone has with a substance a lot. I'm going to use that word a lot, relationship. An individual certainly engages in a relationship with use and what the use brings them. I think this is an incredibly important thing to mention at this point. When an individual uses, it serves a purpose. It serves a purpose in their life. It serves a very good purpose in their life. And that very good purpose in their life may be to not feel the pain that they've been feeling, or to escape, or to just deal. The stressors and traumas of their life may be so severe and have so much weight in their life that they don't even know how to begin functioning. And so substances or behaviors, of course, offer a bit of relief or numbing or escape, or a combination of all of those things. So you're going to hear me talk about the relationship with use, the relationship with substance, the relationship with behavior, and that's where that's coming from. So that's a little bit about terminology. Let's see. Again, just kind of going through your notes. Tolerance and withdrawal, we're going to talk about that when we talk about, how substances work, like the physiology of addiction. We're going to talk about that. Of course, we'll talk about it when we get into diagnosing and different substances. But know that not every substance or behavior does actually have a level of They usually do have tolerance, but not all have withdrawal. And then, so profession in the 21st century, I'm going to talk about that in the next section for chapter 2. We'll go into that a bit. Okay, enjoy your first chapter.